As parents, we're used to planning our children's lives down to the T. What they wear, what school they go to, what activities they do. But one thing that most parents miss off that journey is our children's financial future. In this video, we're going to explore very practically how you can secure your children's financial future starting today. Let's be real, most parents are not securing their children when it comes to them and their money. They're simply hoping on a wing and a prayer that their kids will be okay by the time they get older. Well, reality check. The chances are, in a high inflationary environment like we've got, with everything going up, prices only going one way, chances are that they're gonna need your help. The famous bank of mom and dad is going to need to come to their rescue. But what if the bank of mom and dad is empty? Well, it's about time we solved that and started actually thinking about the plan for putting our children on a good financial footing. I'm gonna go through a bunch of options step by step, and you can decide which one or which ones you go for. Let's start with the old school way, the way that my parents did it, probably the way that your parents did it as well, which is you set up a bank account for your child and you just deposit regular money into this bank account, and perhaps you add in the Eid gifts and other gifts that might come along the way. Now, personally, I'm not actually a fan of this for two reasons. The first is that you're not actually going to get to a very sizable amount of money just by putting £50, £100 here and there every month and hoping that you're going to get to a sizable sum. The second reason is that even if you did manage to save a decent amount of cash, inflation will chip away at that cash as the years go on. And because you're looking at a time horizon of around 20 years, the chances are that inflation will have a significant impact on the bank account. So to give you a very practical example, let's say I wanted to save £80,000 for my child. That would mean that for a period of 18 years, I would have to deposit £370 every single month in order to get to that amount. Now that's all well and good, but the point about inflation is that I could have got to £80,000 by actually putting in much less if I put them into investments from the start that grew over time. So the value for money is going to be better if I choose investments over cash. However, the flip side to all of this, and the flip side to the cash is trash, is that cash is actually king. Meaning that cash is not dependent and isn't subject to the fluctuations of investments. It doesn't care what the stock market does. It doesn't care what the property market does. £1 is £1. And even if inflation does chip away at that £1, you've still got that money to hand. Am I personally likely to use this approach? Maybe. Perhaps if I got to, let's say, the last few years of my goal, and I'm now starting to become much more defensive. I want to take the money out of investments because I don't want the risk that comes with investments. I might start shifting some of that stuff to low risk investments, and perhaps some of it, maybe 20%, maybe less, maybe more, I might actually just shift entirely to cash. But if you're at the early stage of your children's savings journey, then cash is probably not something that you want to be looking at. That's all well and good, but how can investing actually help us to achieve those figures without putting huge amounts in savings? Actually, it's very doable if you know where to put the money. Let's do the maths on this. The average child when they're born gets about £500 in cash gifts, and they get about £50 every Eid. That's about £100 every year. So if you invested that initial £500 plus the £100 that you're getting every year, and you opted for around an 8% return, which is fairly moderate investment over a long period of time, you would actually end up after 18 years with around £6,800. Now, if you then decide that you want to supplement that with maybe £50 a month, and you do that over 18 years, you're going to end up with £31,000. Now, that's a pretty decent size of money. It will probably allow them to cover most, if not all, of their uni fees. It could be a head start on a deposit. There's multiple uses for that kind of money. See, it's very feasible.
But I don't have much to invest. What should I do?
Investing something, no matter how little, is still better than investing absolutely nothing. Sorting out half of your child's uni fees is better than sorting out none of them, right? So now that we're in agreement that investing is the way to go, especially in today's crazy inflationary market, now we need to actually figure out what we would invest in. And here we've got a few options. Most parents are very fearful when it comes to investing for themselves, let alone for their children. But this is the point. This is where you will get ahead and your child will get ahead if you can actually start implementing these steps. And we'll go through them step by step. It's not as scary as it sounds, I promise. So there's two ways to do this. You could invest directly into stocks. So you set up an account with a stockbroker online, you invest in the companies that you want to invest in, and you simply wait it out. This way, you will be subject to capital gains tax if you're in the UK, which is where you make a gain on your capital, you will be subject to a tax on that. The other way to do this, to avoid the tax, is to open what's called a junior ISA. So you open a stocks and shares junior ISA account where your child will have an annual allowance of around £9,000 that you can utilize, and it's in your child's name. And that way, anything you invest in that junior ISA wrapper is completely free of any tax when you withdraw it. Just a word of caution though, if you do go down the junior ISA route, this account will legally belong to your child. So as soon as they turn 18, they will have full rights and full control over it. Now, that's a decision for you to make. Personally, I prefer to do the investing myself, and then I will make the decision as to the allocation for my children when that particular time comes.
An ISA stands for Individual Savings Account. So a junior ISA is that for under 18s. It is essentially a tax efficient way to invest, which is how it's different from a savings account.
Thanks for that, Khizr. So you've got two main types of junior ISAs. You've got your cash junior ISA, which is where you earn interest on the cash amount that you have in that account. Now, suffice to say that this is haram and a big no-no from an IFG perspective. However, there is a halal alternative. That is a stocks and shares junior ISA, where you can open a junior ISA and you can simply use the money in that junior ISA to invest in stocks and shares. And that way you're still taking advantage of the tax-free benefits that a junior ISA comes with. A junior ISA currently in 2023 has an allowance of £9,000 per year, so you can only fund it with a maximum of that and avail of the tax benefits. This route is completely halal, assuming that the things that you invest in are themselves halal. So these could be individual stocks, or they could be halal equity funds like ETFs, etc.
ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. Essentially what they are is a basket of stocks and shares of various companies, like the S&P 500, which is not halal to invest in, or the HSBC Amana Fund, which is permissible to invest in. So say you wanted to invest £1,000. If you invested that £1,000 into an ETF, it would be split amongst all the companies that fall into this fund. Therefore, it splits up your risk in case any one of those companies performs badly in the stock market.
Thanks, Khizr. We actually have a course as well that teaches you how to do that, and that's in the link below. If you're keen on the junior ISA route, you'll have to sign up to one using an online broker. There are lots and lots out there. In the UK, popular ones are AJ Bell, Hargreaves Lansdown, and perhaps other ones too. At this early stage of my kids' financial journey, I do find the stock market very compelling. The idea that I could invest in either an up-and-coming company that could be a giant in 20 years, or even frankly a giant of today that I think will still be in existence in 20 years, is likely to grow a significant amount of money. To put that into context, if you would have invested in Amazon back in the day and you'd have put $1,000 in there, your child would be sitting on a cool $1.7 million. Admittedly, the chances of finding a particular stock like that and actually holding onto it for that period of time are relatively slim, but it does give you an idea of the power of the stock market. On a more realistic level, you could just go the slow and steady approach in the stock market, opt for an 8% return a year, and you could get somewhere pretty sizable with that alone. For example, if you started with an initial £5,000, that would swell to around £23,000, which is not bad at all. And of course, it would be even more if you start adding to that on a monthly basis too. Now, this is something I'm seriously considering. The great thing about property is that you can get leverage from a bank.
Leverage basically means when you use a bank's money to acquire an asset and profit from it. It's really just an investment strategy that many people use. For example, if you used a halal or haram mortgage to buy a property and then you put that property up for rent, and then the money from the rent would essentially pay for the mortgage. Overall, the property would pay for itself.
Thanks, Hizo. We've explored at length our position at IFG on Islamic mortgages. We've explored all the different ones that are available. So check out the links in the description for more detail there. As an assumption, we'll assume that you will be taking out an Islamic mortgage and that they're permissible during the course of this video. Everyone loves property because it's physical, it's tangible, you can touch it, you can feel it. Even in a depressed market where everything's going wrong, you can still visit that house and have the comfort that it is your house. From an investment perspective, investors have traditionally loved property because it very easily pays for itself. This makes leverage all the more attractive. Let's take an example. Let's say I bought a house somewhere in the north of the UK for £100,000, and let's assume I am making a 5% yield on that. So I buy it for £100,000, I'm making £5,000 every year, and let's say that I put down a £20,000 deposit to begin with. That leaves me with an £80,000 balance, and I would be slowly paying that off every year with the £5,000 a year that comes in. And you don't need to be a mathematician to work out that that is a period of 16 years that you would need in order to pay off that £80,000. In reality, it would take slightly longer as you would be paying the bank some extra during the course of that period, but the point still stands. In other words, you would have paid off the property during the course of your child's early life, and then once they're ready to move on to their next journey, they've got a tangible asset that they can call on and which is probably appreciated in value as well. And so the £100,000 asset that you've bought might be worth £150,000 now. Of course, the figures need tweaking and twisting for your individual scenario, but the figures I gave are pretty realistic. And if you can get yourself in a position where you've got a deposit, you've got a house that's paying itself off over the early life of your child, then that is a very nice position to be in. So with these very rough calculations and assumptions, we can say that you could, with a deposit, pay off a house within about 20 years and then be sat on a nice juicy asset at the end of it. Now, of course, we use the figure of £100,000, and in 20 years' time, that £100,000 house is going to be worth more than £100,000 because the cost of houses goes up. For instance, if you bought something for £127,000 in 2000, that in 2016 would have been worth £205,000. So a real return of 60%. Not bad. So you could hypothetically be sitting on an asset that is worth well over £100,000 and it's cost you absolutely nothing. That just goes to show you the beauty of forward planning and getting your stuff in order from day one. Your child would then have this asset ready to use. They could simply move into it if they wanted to use it as a family home for themselves. They could sell it and use the money to do something else, or they could use it as collateral to get a loan from the bank. The options are multiple. Would I use this approach? Absolutely. And unless someone can point out a downside, I can't really see any flaw with this approach. Now, stocks and property are the two obvious choices when it comes to investing, and they're the ones that come to mind for pretty much everybody. But out there in the world of investing, there are lots of other options that merit further investigation. For instance, if you want exposure to property, you can, through our investment arm, Curate Capital, get access to elite funds that invest in real estate for you, and you get exposure to really high quality property through that. Another alternative, if you can't put together an entire deposit yourself, is to find other members of your family or perhaps friends that you trust and that you could pitch together with in order to buy a house that you would then divide up between yourselves. Other interesting options include investing in startups like we offer at Curate Capital. And with these, the idea is that you invest in a basket of startups in the hopes that one or more of them become very, very large companies and that your capital grows exponentially. Your small stake in that kind of company could lead to absolutely huge returns. But obviously it comes with high risk because most startup businesses fail. So it's definitely one to tread carefully and to size your investment accordingly. Personally, I'm using a mixture of these investment options for my children. So they already have stocks, they already have various different investments. I intend to get them on the property ladder. And I'm sure that as the years go by, I'll be switching in and out of different investments. The point is that I intend to be proactive and thoughtful about this as my children's early life progresses and as they enter adulthood. Because ultimately what I want for my children is that by the time they get married, they've got a nice cash balance to start off their new life. Another thing that I'm considering, which you might also want to consider, is depending on the commercial aptitude of my children as I see them growing up, I will actually allocate money to them for them to start investing. And this is a crucial point. We should be open to perhaps losing money for the sake of them learning. We invest money in our children's education, and this is no different. If they happen to invest and lose money, that's not a problem as far as I'm concerned, because I simply see that as tuition fees. But if they invest and actually do pretty well out of it, then maybe I can take a back seat. Hope you've enjoyed watching. Until the next time, Assalamu alaikum.